Our next speaker will be Hayden Ludwig, an investigative researcher from Capital Research Center, and he will be talking about rejecting false guilt.
Back again. I want to start by saying that the world will end, and the world will end in fire. They're absolutely right about that, but it'll be because a sovereign God decrees it, not because you failed to buy a Prius. It's true. We're told that climate change is the great issue of our day, and that Christians of all people must step up and prove we care about the environment. After all, don't we believe that God gave man dominion over the earth? It put into practice, that really means voting for increasingly radical politicians with an increasingly radical platform of green tyranny. The politically correct message is that the only way to care for creation is through sweeping government mandates. It's a hostage situation. Support our global warming schemes, or else the world will burn. But the truth is that we don't need to be lectured by environmental activists and their socialist allies, because Christians are the original stewards of the planet, not them. So what can we say in our defense? What do the people of God stand for? Well, let's compare the record. Christians believe that God made man in his own image and after his own likeness, and gave humanity, male and female, dominion over all the earth and every living thing upon it. We were created to be good, but rebelled and caused sin to enter the world. Environmentalism, on the other hand, recognizes no creator. It inverts the Bible by teaching that people, not sin, are a blight upon the planet and should be treated like pests. Christians have always taught prudence and reverence for creation, both the protection and engagement of natural resources. We join with the psalmist in marveling at God's handiwork when he wrote that, "The heavens are yours, the earth also is yours, the world and all that is in it, you have founded them." Not so for environmentalism, which makes an idol of the earth and seeks to control what we eat, where we live, and even the size of our families. These are men and women who, in the Apostle Paul's words, have exchanged the truth for a lie and worshiped the creature rather than the creator. I've spent some years tracing the environmental movement back to its origins in Marxism. That's not to say anyone who cares about clean air and water is a Marxist. I don't know anyone who doesn't care about conserving those things. But we must recognize that environmentalism, not conservation, is a dogma rooted in the most profoundly anti-God, anti-human ideology in history. Marxists teach that all history is measured by conflicts between groups of people, workers versus capitalists, black versus white people, men versus women, or so-called environmental polluters versus victims, building towards a socialist utopia where everyone is equal. This kind of thinking is the true genesis of global warming theory, which posits that the earth is getting ever hotter and humans are to blame. So it's up to government to save us by robbing us of all oil, coal, and natural gas. But there's a problem with that theory. Their favorite green energy sources, wind turbines and solar panels, simply won't do the job. They're extremely resource intensive and embarrassingly ineffective at providing power compared with traditional energy sources. No serious policymaker would attempt to power the national grid with them. And since the left is always opposed to nuclear energy, there's one nuclear option left: population control. This was the mantra of early environmentalists in the 1970s, long before my time, when doomsayers like biologist Paul Ehrlich spread the lie that most of the world would starve to death by the 1980s. Their solution was socialism, a one-world planetary regime to distribute food and water equitably. But population control actually dates back to the 1920s, when progressives proudly stood for eugenics, forced sterilization, and white supremacy. Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger enlisted support from anti-Semites who pioneered the Nazis' Aryan racial theory, leaders from the American Eugenics Society, and others who condemned Americans' unlicensed, uncontrolled, irresponsible parenthood. These people should be sterilized, Sanger scorned. Planned Parenthood advocates for global warming policies today as loudly as the eco-left. They clearly believe that the two issues are linked. But telling people you're going to enforce China-styled one-child policies to downsize the global population and save us from climate change doesn't sell well. So activists use fear to spread their message as science. That's why the left demonizes carbon dioxide, a gas essential to life on Earth, and why we've gone from global cooling to global warming to climate change to my personal favorite, climate weirding. Climageddon activists have ratcheted up the rhetoric so much that Oxford Dictionary even made climate emergency its 2019 word of the year. Word of the year. And honest leftists will admit the kinship between environmentalism and global depopulation. In 2014, the liberal magazine The Atlantic proposed nationwide voluntary family planning, the euphemism for abortion coined by Sanger a century ago, as the climate change solution no one will talk about. Last year, the prominent climate change advocate and atheist Richard Dawkins tweeted fondly about the pseudoscience of eugenics. That's the beautifying of the human race. It's declaring that it works for cows, horses, pigs, dogs, and roses. Why on earth wouldn't it work for humans? And depopulation is a big business. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a critical funder of experiments with second trimester abortion drugs, second trimester, which are tested on poor women in Africa and Asia. The Gates Foundation is also a key funder of the Population Council and Zero Population Growth, groups that were created decades ago to stave off overpopulation and now continue that campaign as a solution to global warming. Warren Buffett is another leading funder of global depopulation. I've calculated that Buffett's foundation has poured more than $4 billion, that's billion with a B, into pro-abortion, pro-population control groups in the last 2 decades. That's enough to pay for 8 million abortions a pop. $500 a pop, excuse me. That includes funding Pathfinder International, created in the 1950s by a eugenicist and Sanger ally, to depopulate Africa in the name of progress. That's the legacy that so-called Christian environmentalists and creation care advocates don't reveal to Christians. There's simply no way to separate this evil ideology from Marxism or the movement for unrestricted abortion. Environmentalism is simply the fastest road to socialism. But here's our answer to the left. We believe in honoring creation through conservation, not an unscientific dogma. We believe in the separation of church and state, one of the great products of the Protestant Reformation, but not in the separation of the government from God. God instituted government to safeguard the sanctity of human life. 60 million abortions since 1973 is proof that our government does not. This year, we're faced with a choice to continue down that dark road or to turn from sin, fighting evil in our hearts, in our churches, and at the ballot box. We're blessed with the opportunity to choose the civil authorities who govern us. I pray you'll see past the lies of the enemy, whatever shape they come in, and exercise that freedom to vote for what's right in November. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Hayden Ludwig. Absolutely wonderful. My name is Matthew Bellis. I'm here on a panel with Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, Kelly Kohlberg, and Congressman Bob McEwen. Congresswoman, let me start with you because this is a fascinating subject that we really should know more about in terms of the infiltration of the church. But, it used to be about proper stewardship and conservation. Do you know when that type of approach to the environment changed to environmentalism?
Well, I think it was the late 60s and the early 70s. I remember back in the 1960s as a child looking at commercials on TV, and they had an American Indian and had a tear coming down his eyes when they were talking about litter. Well, that was a good message. But then in the late 60s and the early 70s, then it changed. But I just wanted to comment on something that Ludwig said, and he said that they hate carbon dioxide. That's what they hate. So what I'm wondering is, why are they forcing us all to wear these masks so that we breathe in oxygen, and then we take out, we blow out the carbon dioxide, and so they're forcing me to rebreathe and re-deal with my carbon dioxide all day? No, thank you.
They're creating climate change within the mask.
They are.
So, Kelly, let me ask you about our churches and environmentalism. Do you see our churches being overrun with this type of ideology, or is it just in the beginning stages?
There's no force in the history of the world that's been more, admiring and respectful and stewarding of God's creation than the Church of Jesus Christ. I mean, just think of the great hymns for the beauty of the earth. Right. So many. This is my Father's world, and on and on. And so how ironic that of all people, the church would be considered anti-stewardship.
Yeah.
And so let's just hold on to the beauty of the Creator and of His creation that we all love so much, of an immediate world, immediate life, not a mediated by man existence, and just enjoy the creation, what we find in Scripture, and not through the social engineering of men.
Yeah. Congressman, it seems to me that whenever you go into any kind of dark ideology, in some way you'll find depopulation there.
Yeah.
Why is it a part of environmentalism?
The opposite of God's plan to replenish the earth. But, being a liberal means never having to say you're sorry. And that is...
That's right.
In the 1970s, we all remember when global cooling was, they told about how that they had armadillos in North and South Dakota. And now as global cooling is coming, now they're only down in Texas. And you can Google all those covers. We're going to freeze to death next Tuesday.
Polar bears on ice caps.
But then we also read the books when I was in college that by 1980, we were all going to starve to death, and that New York City, Manhattan would be underwater and all. But it doesn't slow them down a bit. Those same people are still alive.
Yeah.
And he said, when did it begin? It was a lot of the anti-war movement that they moved into that next. Final point is that Satan, a cult, is always 99% good stuff.
Yeah.
And so when you take off from New York, you're heading to London, you're just 1 or 2 degrees off, you're going to end up in Paris. And so Satan wants you to be just enough off that you're going to miss the mark.
Yeah.
And so you say all these noble things as though they sound good, but what it is, you're not focusing on Christ, you're focusing on the creation. And that's what he cares
Amen.
about.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
There's a lot of push lately for more and more green energy. Do you see our future of energy being entirely green, Congresswoman?
No, it's impossible.
Impossible.
No, it's not going to happen.
Congressman?
Yes, but AOC told us we were all going to starve and the world was going to end.
Yeah.
Excuse me. The world was going to end in 8 years. That was 4 years ago. That means we only got 48 months and it's all over.
Well, and the other thing in California, remember what happened. The governors took offline 2 nuclear power plants,
Yeah.
2 coal plants. They didn't replace them, or supposedly they did with green energy. And now they have brownouts like at 3 o'clock every afternoon, and this is not working.
Like the third world. And they don't understand science. Like they're going to save water. Now, where are you going to save it to? I mean, where does it go?
Right.
To Mars or something?
Yeah.
How are we going to? If I don't wash my car, where does that water go? Does it? Oh, thank you so much. I'm going to go sit over here in the park.
Yeah, and these are the people who love science.
Just escapes off into space. Okay. Well, thank you very much, panel. I very much appreciate it. I'm Matthew Bellis, and you have been well versed.